Baalbek, if there was one example, one ancient site on Earth that is evidence of a lost, ancient, advanced civilization,
Baalbek shouldn't be possible. 800-ton stones set 7 meters high with seams so tight a blade can't slip between them. Yet Rome never bragged about it. Some believed its colossal stones were placed by gods or aliens.
Baalbek has the largest stones that were ever quarried in human history, the largest stones that were lifted, stacked, and transported in human history, and the largest stone columns in all of classical history.
Historians long assumed the ruins were built up layer by layer by different cultures over time. But now, stunning new evidence has surfaced, a plan carved directly into the foundation. Did Rome build this, or did they reveal the true builders by carving their map? The Mountain of Impossible Stones. Baalbek's mystery becomes even sharper when you look at one section of its massive foundation. The platform on which the Roman temples stand is made of different layers of stone blocks. Among them, one set has drawn more attention than all the others. This is the trilithon, 3 enormous blocks that have been called some of the heaviest building stones ever used by human hands. Each block of the trilithon measures about 19 meters long, 4 meters high, and over 3 meters thick. They are estimated to weigh up to 800 tons each. What makes them especially shocking is their position. They do not rest on the ground. Instead, they are set nearly 7 meters above it, resting on top of smaller foundation blocks that each weigh hundreds of tons. The joins are so precise that people claim even a sheet of paper would not slide through the gaps. To stand in front of them is to feel both wonder and disbelief. Some experts believe the builders used these stones as a show of strength, a way to impress and intimidate. Others think they were chosen to make the foundation stronger. Arguments continue, but what unites almost everyone is that the feat feels far beyond the normal limits of ancient engineering. And as if the trilithon were not enough, the quarry nearby adds an even bigger question. Less than a kilometer from the main site lie unfinished stones that were never moved. The most famous is the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, which is more than 20 meters long and estimated at around 1,000 tons. In the 1990s, researchers reported the rediscovery of another block, the Stone of the South, weighing about 1,200 tons. In 2014, archaeologists uncovered yet another, the Forgotten Stone, partly buried but measured at nearly 1,500 tons. Some believe it could be the largest stone ever cut by human beings. Why were these giants left behind? Some say they were simply too heavy to move. Others believe work was suddenly abandoned for unknown reasons. According to local legends, jinn were the ones who cut and carried the blocks. In Islamic belief, jinn are invisible beings created from smokeless fire who possess free will and immense strength. Their supernatural powers are often used to explain feats that humans could never achieve. Another story tells of a pregnant woman who tricked townspeople by promising she knew how to move them. Even today, women touch the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, hoping it will bring fertility. A stage for gods and empires. Baalbek did not belong to just one person or one age. It was shaped again and again across thousands of years, with each civilization leaving its own mark. Archaeologists say people settled here as far back as 9000 BCE. The hill on which Baalbek stands looks over the fertile Bekaa Valley and sits close to natural springs. This combination of high ground, water, and rich soil made it a strong place for survival and defense. It also made it easy for early people to see the site as sacred, a place where the gifts of the gods flowed into daily life. By the 3rd millennium BCE, the Phoenicians had turned the hill into a religious center. They were well known as traders and sailors across the Mediterranean, and they raised temples here to Baal, the storm god of fertility, and Astarte, the goddess of love and motherhood. Archaeological fragments suggest that their sanctuary stood on the same summit where later cultures built even larger temples. From that point onward, Baalbek was not just a settlement. It was a sacred stage where humans tried to meet the divine. Centuries later, the Greeks took control. After the campaigns of Alexander the Great in the 4th century BCE, the region became part of the Hellenistic world. Alexander was a Macedonian king who conquered much of the Near East, and he spread Greek culture wherever he went. The Greeks renamed the city Heliopolis, or City of the Sun. Instead of erasing the Phoenician gods, they connected them to their own solar deities and rebuilt the sanctuary with Greek styles. The site remained holy, but it now carried a new identity that linked local faith to a global culture. Rome's arrival in the 1st century BCE changed everything. In 64 BCE, General Pompey brought the region under Roman control because of its fertile land and strategic trade routes. Soon after, Julius Caesar declared Baalbek a Roman colony. This allowed Rome to settle veterans there, secure the frontier, and spread Roman culture. It also marked the city as a key administrative and religious center. They launched a massive building program that transformed the older sanctuary into one of the grandest temple complexes of the empire. They merged Jupiter with Baal into a hybrid deity known as Jupiter Baal. Over time, emperors funded courtyards, stairways, and colossal temples. Each addition meant to glorify Rome and impress both locals and visitors. At its height, Baalbek was not only a place of worship, but also a monument to Roman power in the east. Even after Rome's decline, Baalbek continued to be reshaped. The empire's power had weakened due to internal corruption, economic troubles, and relentless invasions by outside forces like the Germanic tribes. In the 4th century CE, as Christianity spread, pagan altars were torn down and churches rose inside the complex. Later, after the Muslim conquest in the 7th century CE, Baalbek's role shifted once again. Muslim forces took control of the region after defeating the weakened remnants of the Byzantine Empire, which had inherited the territory from Rome. With this new rule, the massive Roman temples were no longer used for worship. Instead, they were converted into a fortified citadel, complete with towers and strong defensive walls. Each new group that ruled Baalbek adapted the structures to meet their needs. The same buildings that had once served as temples for Roman gods were later turned into churches and then into military fortresses. Rather than starting from scratch, every era built on what was already there, reshaping the site for its own purpose and survival. Through these changes, Baalbek became a history book written in stone. Each civilization added something, but not all contributions were equal. These contributions were not equal because each group's influence varied in scale and impact. For example, the Phoenicians first built modest temples dedicated to their gods. The Greeks later expanded on this, blending their own religious ideas with local traditions. But when the Romans arrived, they didn't just expand what was there. They rebuilt much of Baalbek into a massive grand complex that reflected the power of their empire. Their construction was on a scale far beyond what came before. This difference raises an important question. Did the Romans simply inherit a sacred site and improve it? Or did they bring new techniques and secrets of their own that completely redefined what Baalbek was? The answer may lie not in what they built above ground, but in what they inscribed below, marks that would one day change the story of who the true builders were. Before we reach that secret, however, we must first confront the puzzle that defines Baalbek. How could stones of this size have ever been moved? The problem that shouldn't be solvable. Over the years, different methods have been proposed, but each one collapses under closer study. The most common idea is that workers used wooden rollers and sledges. They would place the giant blocks on sledges, then roll them forward over logs. At first, this seems practical, since smaller versions of this technique were used in places like Egypt, but Baalbek's stones were on another level. Tests with smaller blocks show how the system collapses under extreme weight. The logs splinter under pressure or slip dangerously out of place. The sledges, dragged over soft ground, sink deep into the soil. The land between the quarry and Baalbek is not flat either. It rises, dips, and twists in ways that would make pulling 800 tons nearly impossible. Another explanation is the use of earthen ramps. The idea is that long sloping ramps of packed soil allowed the stones to be dragged upward. Ramps were a known technique in the ancient world, but they have their limits. To lift a block to the platform level at Baalbek, a ramp would need to stretch hundreds of meters. Building such a structure would require moving a staggering amount of earth, likely more than the construction of the temple itself. And even if it were built, the immense friction of dragging a 1,000-ton block would quickly bury the sledge in the ramp before it made much progress. Engineers who have tried smaller experiments admit ramps could explain modest stones, but not the largest megaliths at Baalbek. Attention then turned to Roman cranes, one of Rome's greatest engineering achievements. The trapastos, a crane powered by 3 pulleys, could lift about a ton. The pentaspastos, with 5 pulleys, multiplied that ability to several tons. The polyspastos, the most advanced of all, used 15 pulleys, tall wooden masts, and treadwheels powered by men walking inside them. These machines were capable of lifting loads up to 50 or 60 tons, which was extraordinary for the ancient world. But when compared to Baalbek's 800-ton trilithon blocks, they are hopelessly inadequate. Even if multiple cranes worked together, the combined lifting power would fall short by hundreds of tons. Coordinating such a system would have been nearly impossible without catastrophic risk. Some researchers tried to fill the gap with sheer manpower. Calculations suggest tens of thousands of men might have been required to drag the blocks. But there are no records of such huge workforces at Baalbek. Even if they existed, the risks would have been extreme. Ropes could snap, sledges could break, and men could be crushed under the strain. And even if they succeeded in moving them, how were the stones lifted nearly 7 meters and set with joints so fine they look cut by machines? Because each theory has serious flaws, the arguments over Baalbek became intense. According to reports, debates among archaeologists often grew heated. Some dismissed wooden rollers as laughable, while others insisted the Romans had the knowledge and were being underestimated. Unverified accounts say that conferences ended with shouting matches, with experts unwilling to back down. To some, admitting Baalbek was unsolvable meant rewriting the limits of Roman engineering, something many were not prepared to do. Faced with this dead end, archaeologists began to look closer at the stones themselves. They noticed subtle marks and unusual masonry that hinted at something more than raw power. Whispers in the stones. According to findings, some blocks showed drafted margins, which are smooth carved edges framing the rougher middle of the stone face. At first, this looked minor, but to archaeologists, it was a signature. Drafted margins were not random decoration. They were a hallmark of a specific style of stonework. When experts compared Baalbek's margins with other sites, one match stood out above the rest. Jerusalem. The foundations of the Second Temple, expanded by King Herod in the 1st century BCE, display the very same technique. And the similarity did not stop there. Both Baalbek and Jerusalem used a construction method called headers and stretchers. In this system, one stone, the header, was laid lengthwise deep into the wall like an anchor, while the stretcher lay flat along the visible surface. Together they created stability and locked the wall in place. It was a clear building fingerprint, and both cities bore it. The match grew even more unsettling when archaeologists measured the blocks themselves. At both Baalbek and the Second Temple, the standard course height was the same, about 1.11 meters. According to scholars who studied the two sites side by side, this is too exact to be coincidence. Some believe this points to a shared group of builders, or at least a transfer of knowledge. Others have gone further, suggesting that the very masons who worked under Herod in Jerusalem may have traveled north and left their mark on Baalbek. If true, it would mean that Baalbek's earliest foundation, known as Podium 1, was not purely Roman at all. It might carry the imprint of a different tradition hidden beneath Rome's later layers. That possibility makes the silence of Roman records even harder to ignore. The Romans were famous for boasting about their achievements. They wrote proudly of aqueducts, bridges, and even minor engineering projects. Yet when it comes to the megaliths of Baalbek, the record is empty. Roman authors described the temples of Heliopolis, but never the massive stones beneath them. To many historians, this silence is more than an oversight. It looks deliberate, as if Rome had inherited something they could not explain, or perhaps dared not claim. And here the mystery takes a darker turn. If the Romans would not speak of Baalbek, perhaps they left their confession in another form. That silence becomes even more suspicious when you realize it left space for other voices to fill the void. If history refused to answer, people turned to legend, and those legends pointed not to ordinary men, but to giants, gods, and even visitors from beyond the stars. Giants, gods, and aliens. When the stones of Baalbek seemed too massive to be explained, people turned to legends that reached beyond human limits. Folklore in the region long claimed the site was the work of figures from ancient scripture. According to one tradition, Cain, cursed to wander after killing his brother, built Baalbek's foundations in a desperate attempt to create a lasting refuge. Other tales credit Nimrod, the mighty hunter, who was said to have commanded giants to raise the stones as part of his Tower of Babel. Still others whisper that the Nephilim, half-human giants mentioned in the Bible, were the only ones strong enough to move blocks of such staggering size. These stories survived for centuries because they offered a simple answer to an otherwise impossible sight. Ordinary people could not have done this, so it must have been beings beyond ordinary strength. In modern times, the myths took on new life in the age of science fiction and alternative history. Writers like Graham Hancock argued that Baalbek might be a legacy of a forgotten civilization, with knowledge far ahead of its time. Zechariah Sitchin went further, linking the site to the Anunnaki, supposed beings from Mesopotamian myth who, in his speculative theories, came from the stars. Some even claimed the vast stone platform was not a temple foundation at all, but a kind of launch pad for alien spacecraft. These ideas spread quickly through books, television, and documentaries because they tapped into something powerful. They suggested history was stranger than what schools taught and that Baalbek was the ultimate proof. Archaeologists, however, push back on these claims by pointing to physical evidence that is often overlooked. Excavations have documented tool marks still visible on the megaliths, grooves that match the chisels and hammers known to have been used in the ancient world. Unfinished blocks in the quarry bear the same marks, showing where workers abandoned their efforts. According to reports, some stones even preserve faint channels where wedges were inserted to split rock. For archaeologists, these are not signs of giants or aliens, but of human labor. Difficult, yes, but within the realm of human possibility. But if myths explained the mystery in one way, archaeologists were beginning to uncover evidence that told another story. The answers were not found in old tales or whispered traditions, but in the results of modern excavations. This was where speculation ended and discovery began, as researchers started to study Baalbek with science rather than legend. Science uncovers the hidden plan. By the late 19th century, Baalbek was no longer just a mysterious ruin visited by travelers and pilgrims. It had begun to draw the attention of Europe's most powerful figures. In 1898, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany toured the Middle East and included Baalbek on his journey. According to reports, he was stunned by the size of the ruins, especially the massive stone blocks that dwarfed anything built in Europe at the time. Determined to uncover its secrets, he ordered a large-scale excavation. With imperial funding and German expertise, teams soon began clearing away centuries of rubble. For the first time, Baalbek was studied not as folklore or legend, but as an archaeological site of global importance. Their work revealed Roman courtyards, staircases, and colossal foundations that had long been buried under layers of earth and debris. Those early excavations were groundbreaking, but modern science pushed the study of Baalbek to an entirely new level. In 2004, the German Archaeological Institute, working with the Lebanese University, launched the most detailed survey ever attempted. Using digital mapping, three-dimensional models, and precision instruments, they documented every feature of the site, from the distant quarries to the podium walls. Even the smallest cut marks on the stones were recorded. This careful study revealed something that ancient texts and local legends had never explained. The real answers were preserved not in stories, but in the stones themselves. During this survey, researchers noticed details that seemed ordinary at first glance, but soon proved extraordinary. On the floor of the great courtyard, they found straight lines and geometric patterns carved directly into the bedrock. Initially dismissed as scratches, closer inspection revealed they were deliberate. One matched the layout of Baalbek's hexagonal courtyard, drawn at a precise scale of 1 to 12.6. This was not random etching. It was a working architectural plan carved into the site itself. This discovery shed light on one of Baalbek's biggest mysteries, how builders managed to place stones weighing hundreds of tons with such precision that modern engineers compare them to machine cuts. The blueprint showed that the builders were not relying on brute force alone. They combined mathematics, manpower, and mechanical devices, such as wooden lifting towers, ropes, and capstans. Each stage of construction may have been guided by this master plan etched in stone. Yet the discovery raises difficult questions. Why was the plan carved into stone at the site, instead of being drawn on wax tablets or parchment like other Roman designs? Some historians think it was a practical solution, allowing workers to consult it daily without needing literacy. Others see it as a deliberate statement of authorship, a permanent record of their work. But some scholars suggest something far more unsettling, that the Romans only carved plans for the sections they themselves built, while the deepest layers of Baalbek, known as Podium 1 with its massive foundation stones, may have been inherited from an older and unknown culture. The silence of Roman records makes this possibility harder to dismiss. Rome celebrated its engineering triumphs in detail, from aqueducts to amphitheaters, yet no surviving text mentions the colossal foundations of Baalbek. The presence of a carved plan but the absence of any written record suggests that even Rome may not have been the true architect. Together, the blueprint and the Herodian-style podium point to a layered history. Rome's engineers clearly played a role, but the deepest foundation stones may belong to builders whose names are lost to time. What is certain is that Baalbek was no improvised project. It was planned with mathematics, executed with skill, and perhaps built on knowledge Rome itself could not claim. What do you think the floor plan really reveals about the true builders of Baalbek? Share your thoughts in the comments. We would love to hear your theory.